Yo, so it's finally here. It's finally happening. Attack on Titan's final season, episode 1 is here. And wow, people, it sometimes feels like it was just yesterday that I checked out, season 1, episode 1, and things was coming out weekly. And I remember making my first video on Attack on Titan, and that same night, I knew that this was going to be something else. I knew it was going to be a hit at the very least, because people just non-stop were thanking me for putting them onto it. And I'm like, okay, it's awesome, and I appreciate that, you guys love that I put you on, but wow, it was something I hadn't experienced at that point, of people just really being hype about this new series. And fast forward 7 years later, over 7 years, and here we are. Now, there's a lot to discuss, right? There's a lot to unpack with this first episode, because things feel very different. And I'm not talking about the aesthetics, I'm not talking about the art and animation, because most people know by now that this was animated by Studio Mappa, the same studio that does Jujutsu Kaisen. This is not Studio Wit, the people, the team that did Attack on Titan all these years. We already know that stuff, but in terms of the content, the material itself, it was definitely a radical departure to a certain degree from the Attack on Titan that we already know, which honestly allowed for the studio change, to, if I'm being honest. But yeah, let's talk some of that Attack on Titan, baby. Final season, let's do it.
I say we gonna do what we do, no matter how you move, make your move. That's how it be, though.
Okay, so just keeping it real, the very first moments of this, it feels like, wow, I don't know if I'm watching MASH, the war series or whatever, because it feels like I'm watching a war film. It straight up feels like, they got the army fatigue on there, they're going to war with these people, and I'm just like, wow, this is crazy. It definitely feels very different. It's not the same Attack on Titan, and to be honest with you, we're very far removed at this particular point from the series that we started off with, where, walls were broken down by these titans and things like that. Like, the whole idea of this first episode alone is introducing the fact that the world is no longer completely scared of and at the mercy of these titans. But where we start off, it seems as though we're with an all-new cast at this particular point. Like, mind you, where we left off in Season 3, Eren and them had just finally seen the promised land, so to speak. They reached the shore, and they seen that there was so much more to life. So we're kind of transitioning over to these characters. And don't worry, people, if you're watching the anime without any spoilers, I'm letting you know that there's a method to the madness. So if you're a little bit worried or bummed, like, why are we with these new cast of characters, minus like Reiner and Zeke at the end, like, it'll all make sense in due time. Trust me, they're not going to just completely say screw everything up until this point. There's a reason why we're seeing these characters. But we got Gabby, we got Falco, we have Holt, Commander, is it Magath? I think that was what it was. It wasn't Shadis, right? Yeah, I get confused with the two of them. But we have new cadets, so to speak. And if you think about it, it kind of reminds you just a more war version. And this side of the story, like, they're fighting with the Titans, using the Titans and whatnot. But it feels like, if you think about it, when they were like training in the beginning of Attack on Titan, and like, Eren and them, is like that kind of what it felt like, except it feels a lot more serious, because you see that, for starters, people are dying left and right. There's dead bodies. They're truly at war with the Mid-East at this particular point, and these are the Marley. But there's also Eldians there, and forgive my knowledge, because I'm not trying to spoil anything at all, but I believe it was already revealed that essentially what the Eldians are, opposed to, what the Marley people are. If it hasn't been completely revealed, and I'll check you guys' comments, you guys let me know. I'm not going to dive any further into it, but yeah, we see that the Eldians, they're definitely separated from the Marley, and they're used as like the front line, and they're kind of almost segregated to a certain degree. They're treated as like, just foot soldiers for us. And they've been at war for 4 years, so definitely a lot of time has passed since the end of Attack on Titan, since they reached the shore and whatnot. So yeah, time skip and a half. But we get introduced to a character that, I'm gonna be honest with you, and you will see in due time, and I'm not gonna elaborate any further why, but boy, it reminded me of we got Gabby anyway, and I'm not fond of Gabby. I'll put it to you very lightly. I'm not fond of Gabby, but seeing her and her knowledge and her willpower, so to speak, because we find out in this episode, this girl Gabby, she wants to inherit the armored Titan, and she's like, eager to showcase why she's deserving of it. She goes and plays possum to these other soldiers, has a bomb or some like hand grenades tied to her leg, and ends up taking out this armored train, because one of the things that has been introduced in here is, again, that the Titans themselves are not the big head honchos that they were anymore. Like, you start Attack on Titan and you see within the walls, Eren and them, like they were at the mercy of these Titans, and if they ever got within the walls, it was over. On this side of things, like the artillery that they're working with, this armored train, for example, is nothing to muck with. So they had to have Gabby, and Gabby did the thing. She ended up blowing that shit up. And then at the same time, we have one of the Titans. I want to say he was the Jaw Titan. Forgive me if I'm wrong on that, but you got the Titans going crazy. And honestly, it feels like somewhat of a different series. And again, I think that that's why they're able to get away with switching studios, because again, first of all, you're starting off with a whole new cast at this point of the story. It's a time skip. The structure of the story is different. The Titans now are essentially on the opposite side of the spectrum. They're not the ones conquering. They're not the ones that are in total control. They're almost like underdogs at this point, which is crazy to say, but you could definitely see within this episode, especially everything that Reiner gets. Reiner, for being the armor Titan, bro, he always gets like slaughtered. Like, how strong really is that armor, fam? But then eventually we see Reiner and Zeke, and they're in this plane, and they're getting ready to, like, because, one of the things Zeke says is this whole war started here because we failed. One of the things that they needed in order to stop this war, in order to make sure that the Marley reigned supreme, was they needed Eren, and they needed the founding Titan powers, so that way they could control everything. They needed the coordinates. They needed all of that jazz was to prevent this, and because they failed, that's why this war began. That's been going on again for 4 years, and man, the sick and sadistic stuff that goes on. Zeke throwing out all these people, you can see they petrified to death, they're scared, getting thrown out of the freaking plane, and then him turning them into Titans, and we got flying Titans coming out of the sky. And I ain't gonna lie, I just think to myself, and I remember years ago seeing this, I think this was like chapter 90, 91, and thinking to myself, yo, imagine if I saw Titans just falling out of the sky. I would probably shit myself, piss myself, I would die of a heart attack, just looking like, yo, what the fuck? I would die right there before they even touch base, yo. Like, oh, poor guys, man, because it's war at the end of the day, and they're using every trick in the book, these Marley people, because throwing Titans out of the sky, Reiner and Zeke jumping out of the plane. Like, imagine the armored Titan just jumping down. Which, let's talk about something real quick. An elephant in the room that I've seen, the fact that the Titans were almost primarily throughout the episode CGI'd, and in some of the previous seasons, a lot of the times, minus like the Colossal, usually they would do traditional animation, but they've used CGI in the past for the Titans, but again, it wasn't as frequent as we've seen in this episode. A good majority of the shots of the Titans, the main Titans, like the armored and Zeke and whatnot, the Beast Titan, were CGI'd, and I'm gonna keep it so real with you, and I don't care if people feel differently about it. It is what it is. We can agree, we can disagree, we can debate about it, but my opinion is it was incredibly done. It was incredibly blended, that, to be honest with you, like, is because I've seen so much anime and so much shit that I could kind of recognize that it was CG, but a lot of the times it was just so well done. And if they started doing CG more like this, where it's easier for them to, maneuver these gigantic colossal monsters, but they're still using the CGI, I'm fine, because it blended in very, very well. And if anything, it felt like, kind of like a boss battle within an anime or some weird shit. Like, it's hard to describe, but it blended very nicely. And I know probably people are going to differ in opinions regarding that, but I felt like they're learning how to utilize CGI and have it blend in and not feel like, oh my god, what is this computer piece doing in the middle of my anime? I felt like they just nailed it. They did a great job with especially the Armored Titan, the Beast Titan, and yeah, I have no complaints about the CGI. In fact, I want to applaud their job of how they did the Titans with the CGI, because this could have been a train wreck, but Mappa, they got it down. But then at some point we see, going back into the story, that, because Reiner is there trying to take out the armored train, because they have another one, they got all sorts of weapons there, and you see Reiner get tore the hell up in this episode, and we've seen him in the past get tore up, and honestly, it really starts to look like, yo, how strong is that armor, especially now with this artillery? But I think that's more of a statement, because in the past, of course, he's getting torn up by them strategizing down to the T, using other Titans, like Eren's Titan and shit like that, to be able to crack through the armor Titan. And this one, they're just straight up using bombs and weapons and stuff like that. But Reiner is just like, boom, his arm, boom, he's just like puddle of mush towards the end of the episode. And again, the statement that was said by Zeke at the end of the episode stands so true, because after a certain point, they just got the submarines, and after that, it's all over. The war will end, and you got Zeke there pitching, like, looking like a straight up, he's in the MLB and shit, and he's pitching the bombs at these, but then some of them fly back, and Reiner jumping in front, and I'm like, oh my god, he just gets annihilated, obliterated. He's there on the floor in absolute pieces. And mind you, Zeke was able to stop the war at that point. You know, he threw the last bombs and finished them off, but at what cost? And again, a showcase of it's not the same world of Attack on Titan of what we started back in 2013 when, you know, just there was no hope against the Titans. Like, humanity has found a way to create these weapons that are able to combat the Titans, and it's not a Titans world anymore. Like, throughout the episode, and they have a lot of Titans with them. You know, they got the Beast Titan Zeke, not to mention that he's just a freaking genius. You got the Armored Titan Reiner. You have the Cart Titan. You've seen her maneuvering in this episode as well. You got, I believe, again, the Jaw Titan, if I'm not mistaken. Like, you had quite a few amount of Titans fighting these people, and they still managed to kick ass. And honestly, if it wasn't for having all of that, and think if they have advanced just a bit more with the technology and shit, Marley probably wouldn't have won this. So it's a stark reminder that the reign of Titan supremacy in Attack on Titan's world is coming to an end, and definitely an interesting thing. Honestly, this whole episode, it just felt different. It felt like you could argue maybe Isayama at this point, and I don't know if I felt this way with the manga, but it feels as though maybe he wanted to write a sequel, but at the same time didn't want to abandon his story completely, because again, you got Reiner, you got Zeke. It's still showcasing that this is the same story. It's just furthering and looking at the narrative through a different perspective of now we got introduced to these other characters that they're fighting, and you know, characters like Gabby, Falco, Colt, they don't understand the world yet at this point, you could imagine. Like, they're just looking like, I'm defending my home country, the same way Eren and them were defending their home country, their turf, trying to exterminate the Titans so that they could live in peace. So it's going to be interesting to see. Overall, this episode, great first episode. You could argue, yeah, I could tell the difference, and again, I've been watching anime for a long time, criticizing, reviewing anime for a long time, so I could see the difference from like Studio to this. But in terms of how they handle the CG, in terms of the narrative, the characters, where we're at right now, it feels like a different story to a certain degree with the war aspects. But yeah, they did a phenomenal job. Great first episode for the final season of Attack on Titan. I can't believe we're here, folks. I can't freaking believe it. But I'm very curious what you guys think. The big question, how did you feel about this first episode? What did you think about it? You think that Studio Map was doing a great job at this adaptation? Did you notice the differences from Studio Wit to this? How did you feel about the CGI Titans in this one? And your overall thoughts and expectations for episode 2 of the final season of Attack on Titan. I'm loving it so far. And if they keep it up the way they did this first episode, I think there's nothing to worry about, and this is going to be a phenomenal ending to a great and arguably classic anime at this point, Attack on Titan. But that is all I have for this one. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you liked anything I had to say or enjoyed the video, drop me a like. I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you want more from me, make sure to subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram. Hit that bell to get all notifications. And if you want to follow any of my other social media, links in the description below. I'm ForneverWorld, and as always, people, have an awesome day. And remember the golden rule: anime and manga for life. Bye. Have an awesome day. Peace in, and Attack on Titan final season. Go watch it. It's great.
It's nights like this, and times like this,
What's that?
that I can give another hit. But I've got this inside a switch.